Another program which you've heard a lot about in other lectures in this class is much of our core business, and that it's school feeding, nutrition for education, as we call it in Bangladesh. And here, the key in many of these most food insecure areas is we have a very high percentage, of course, of these children who are in the category of the ultra poor. And you remember that I've explained that in situations like this, what we're concerned about is not just getting these calories to these children, but getting these critical micronutrients and vitamins to them at this critical stage of their life. And this is our key focus in a country like Bangladesh in our school feeding program. UNICEF works with us very closely in the food delivery and monitoring with the other NGOs. The partnership with UNICEF helps us tremendously in building capacity in schools with teacher training and provision of books and writing materials and such for the children. There's another program called Integrated Food Security, which is also over a 2-year cycle. I like to characterize this program as like VGD Plus, Vulnerable Groups in Development Plus, the program that you heard about earlier. This is for women in particular who are in need of more than just the basic training and the basic food. And so they are paid much more in cash for wages. It's a food for work program where they receive some of the same development packages and that they would otherwise in the VGD program, but they also are gainfully employed on various community works projects as well, and receive relatively more in terms of calories, food generally for themselves and their families. This is another program called, in our parlance, Protracted Relief and Rehabilitation Operation. And the reason we use that wording in this case is this is a segment of the country that is coming out of a protracted war or civil war period. This is an area called the Chittagong Hill Tracts. This is mainly indigenous people who are quite ethnically different from the majority population in the country. Our program strategy there is somewhat different to what we do elsewhere in the country. There's lots of sensitivities to do with the nature of how people live in this part of the country. We work particularly with indigenous NGOs, local NGOs, to support them and help build capacity in this region. And our program approach is very similar to the VGD and the IFS programs I mentioned earlier. They're just slightly tweaked, slightly different to account for our particular needs that we need to be looking at in working in this very, very unique community of the country. And then lastly, we have another protracted refugee or relief and rehabilitation operation, which is more of a classic refugee situation that you find, unfortunately, all over the world more and more. In this case, it's a relatively small number of refugees in 7 camps throughout the country, or throughout the area here in Bangladesh, right along the border with Myanmar in the extreme southeast part of Bangladesh. And here we are providing a general food aid ration, so we are trying to provide a very significant portion of the daily caloric needs of this population because they are completely dependent on international aid. There's food for training and school feeding in the camps because we have schools there. There's a small food for work program for the host population. This is something very critical in most countries in that there tends to be a lot of resentment among those living in the area where the camps are based. The resentment is that these people then are seen as being privileged refugees and such. It's very important that we also, all of us involved in working with the refugees also have comparable programs for those who might be equally poor and destitute, who are citizens of that country living around the camps. And that's an example of what we do in Bangladesh as well. So overall, I have stressed numerous occasions in this class that everything that we do in the international community in terms of development assistance and relief support is voluntary. And I know I've repeated that time and time again, but I do that purposely because it's very important that that we be reminded throughout this course that the solution is resources, and those resources are freely given based on confidence, based on faith and confidence that we, those of us who are involved in this work, are able to actually deliver and produce those results that we say we will do. And in our case, in WFP, we have something called results-based monitoring, where we specifically work hard to make sure that we can demonstrate impact and results from this program that I've just explained to you. The M&E means monitoring and evaluation system, so that's the key priority, to make sure that that is comprehensive and functioning in place. Operational both in Dhaka, in our headquarters, if you will, and then at the field level. And then we want to make sure that our counterparts are being trained to ensure that they feel ownership, that they feel part of this program. And again, as we step back and if we eventually phase out, they will feel themselves that they can manage it on their own. And when we do run into problems, and trust me, we have problems all the time in implementing these programs. Once these operations are underway, this a 5-year country program like I've been explaining, the vast majority of our time, of those posted in the country, is simply focused on this system, monitoring and evaluating and understanding and self-correcting at all times. We're not doing all the work ourselves in terms of the implementation, again, because we've got many partners who implement for us, but we will work with them, but we're just constantly monitoring to make sure that results are being achieved. And if not, it's very important, of course, that we take corrective measures as soon as possible to maintain the confidence of those supplying the resources to us. So in the case of Bangladesh, as I've said, this is one of our largest country programs in the world. We also have a large number of staff. In our case, it's 185, which is large. Myself and all the senior staff were based in Dhaka, which is the capital city. That would be our WFP headquarters, if you will. And then we have regional offices, we call them, in these different towns throughout the country: Rangpur, Jeshwar, Rangamati, and Chittagong. Chittagong is the main port. And then the field offices in Cox's Bazar, they're the ones dealing with the refugee program in particular. So those of you thinking about this line of work someday, this just gives you an idea of an organizational chart. This is the case of WFP in Bangladesh a few years ago. So someone like myself would be here at the top, country director. There would be a deputy country director. We would be expatriates typically. You'll always be posted in countries other than that of your home nationality or your home country. And the expatriates, like us, move every 3 to 5 years, depending on the hardship level of the country. Then we had 3 different key areas: 1, strategic planning and policy; knowledge management; and then disaster and preparedness response. Out of the 185 staff, I think I had roughly 14 international staff who would be heading up these different units. And then the rest would be national staff, local staff, but Bangladeshi staff. Very, very high qualified, very competent, very motivated people. I can't speak enough about how good they were and what a pleasure it was to work with them. These are people who generally are working in the country office like this maybe their entire career of 30 years. Some of them may aspire to become international staff and then work in different countries. That often happens. But many, for lots of reasons, decide to stay right in their country. They are the secret for all of us involved in this line of work. They are the secret to this success. We international staff come and go every few years. The continuity, the good in-depth understanding of the issues in the country rests with the local staff. And they're the ones that maintain the good work from year to year to year.